Yes, indeed, folks. Listen to Blue Please, or Open Please today. I had no content, but the listeners have provided quite nicely indeed. Yes, it's good stuff. Right, let's see what else we've got. There is an article I do want to cover. Hell, let's have a look at it right now. I'm going to send you all there. This is some good stuff, ladies and gents. I'm going to post this in the show notes for those listening on the archive. If you're listening via iTunes, the show notes are over at cynicalbrit.com. Go check that out. I'm going to post it in the chat room. Both chat rooms, in fact. This is an awesome piece of writing. Here by one of the leaders of a top 3 in the world hardcore 10-man guild. Yes, they do exist. This is a great article. It does contain strong language. I am totally fine with that, considering. So, let's have a look at what he has to say. Now, this is by Kuldam, and he's of the guild Vox Immortalis. They're a 10-man horde guild. Strictly 10-man. That means no 25-man content or any nonsense along those lines. And they are on Hyjal US. And I want to give some props to these guys, and particularly to the author of this article, because he gets it. He's got the perspective to provide a very, very good point of view on this particular topic. Now, a lot of this is covered by last week's show, but there are a couple of points that I would like to address. Again, this is a rather profanity-littered article, but certainly worth a read nonetheless. So go leave him a comment. Say hello from Blue, please. Now, funnily enough, he's very, very nicely managing to take apart Lord Beef, who is one of the guys over at Elitist Jerk, so I must say I have very little respect for at the moment, or indeed anyone over at EJ right now. Used to be such a great community, and then it became a bunch of Elitist Jerks, funnily enough. Way more so than usual. And it became worthless, and therein lies the problem with it. I have no problem saying that. Okay. So, bunch of quotes here. Bunch of really good stuff. So, he talks about a few things specifically. The logistics of forming a 25-man guild. He's got a 3-point thing here of how people are trying to draw the line down between 10 and 25-man guilds and say that 25-man is somehow harder. And funnily enough, he's able to derail things that I didn't even think of. So, first things first. He talks specifically about logistics. 3 points being made over at people at Elitist Jerks as to why this is a terrible idea. And these are the 3 points that are being made. 1. Logistics of forming a 25-man raid or guild. Now, they claim that forming a 25-man raid and guild is harder than a 10-man guild, and that should be taken into account. However, this guy has an alternative idea, an alternative thesis on this particular point. So, this is what he has to say, ladies and gents. Yes, 25 people is more than 10, but as many 10-man guilds can attest, the reality is the pool of potential players that are looking for a 25-man guild far outweigh those looking for a 10-man. Moreover, due to the stigma and equipment benefits of doing 25-man raiding, high-quality players tend to lean towards 25-man guilds when deciding which format to choose. Therefore, and this is his quote, I emphatically disagree that logistical forming of a 25-man is inherently more difficult than a 10-man. At the least, we could contend they each have their own difficulties and call it even. It's a very good point, isn't it? And funnily enough, I faced this very thing. Now, when it comes to forming a guild, I've got a little bit of an advantage over a lot of people. I've got this show. This show goes out to an awful lot of people. Let me put it that way. And as a result, I have access to a larger player pool that is more inclined to come play with me than a normal person would. Not to blow my own trumpet or anything, by any stretch. I'm just saying, if you have a platform, it makes it so much easier to get something like this going. But even then, I noticed that certainly recruiting from a realm in question is really hard if you're not a 25-man guild. Because he's right. Good players gravitate towards the source of the greatest rewards. And I did so for a long time. It took me an awful lot of effort, and indeed a complete disillusionment with 25-man raiding, to accept that actually I would have to take a slightly lower tier of gear in order to get into an environment that I enjoyed playing in. I would have to accept that handicap. And I did so. But a lot of people aren't willing to. And should they be? Not really. This is the funny thing. This is the thing that the whiners who claim that 25-man is going to die, ZOMG, do not take into account. There are, in fact, 3 kinds of raiders, not 2. There are 25-man raiders, there are 10-man raiders, and then there are the 3rd kind of raiders. And those raiders are the guys that choose which path of progression will get them the best rewards. Those are your 3 kinds of raiders. And the 3rd kind of raiders, as far as I'm concerned, is the most prevalent. I am willing to put money on it. Can I prove it? Hell no. No way. There's no statistics that would prove that one way or the other. It's simply an assertion. But think about the psychology of it. Do you really think that if a line were drawn in the sand, every raider would know straight away which side they wished to stand on? I don't believe that. At all. I think you get a lot of people wondering, I don't know. I raid 25-man now because it gives me the best gear, and it gives me the most gear. But I wouldn't say that I'm a 25-man raider, and certainly not a 25-man purist. And that's the issue, really, isn't it? So yeah, you may see 10-man take a substantial hit. A substantial hit in terms of how many people do it. But when you 25-man raiders harping on about your exclusive club, like, oh, well, you know, the minority of people do this, blah, 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 well, the minority of people have beaten this content, and we're in the 25-man guilds, and blah, 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 we're exclusive. Okay, so surely you're going to be more exclusive if everyone migrates over to 10, right? But of course, that wasn't why you did it, was it? The people complaining are not 25-man raiders. They're not 10-man raiders either. They are fair weather. They pick the path of least resistance to the most loot. Now, I can't blame them for that. At all. That's perfectly reasonable. What is not reasonable is the behavior those people are then exhibiting by whining about things. Okay, you formed a guild and were able to take this path to gain extra loot and do all this good stuff. And yet, do you not have a preference? Because if you liked 25-man raiding, you wouldn't be complaining to begin with. Like I said on the last show, you are a closet 10-man raider. You are a tenophobe. You desperately want a 10-man raid, but the loot is dangling there on your 25-man. And the E-peen is dangling. Yes, indeed. It's waving in front of your face. And we can't sacrifice that now, can we? So important. You should be relieved that this barrier is being removed. Now let's move on to his next point. Again, great article. You should read this in full without me dissecting it and taking little pieces out. Management and raid and group composition. Now, he doesn't like these guys at all. He opens with, this is a retarded argument to even attempt to make, and once again, your 25-man only blinders of ignorance are preventing useful information from reaching your brain. First, start with group composition. How many abilities and buffs are party only these days? Manatide and Tranquility? That's about it. Nearly everything is raid-wide. Group composition is largely ignored, especially since you set it once at the start of the raid and then basically ignore it for the rest of it, save swapping a person or two to get into a Manatide group in a given fight. Hell, you can't even swap in combat, which basically made group composition swaps a thing of the past for most raid leaders. Moreover, it's a fairly safe assumption that the last few remnants of party-only buffs will be going away in favour of raid-wide versions when Cataclysm hits anyway, so it's all a moot point. Raid management is more difficult only if your guild chooses to micromanage like Deuce Nodule raiders. If you are so concerned swapping particular people in and out for each individual boss fight, which I think is fairly uncommon these days for most raids, 25-man or otherwise, then A, you're either retarded because it won't help in the slightest compared to sticking with solid people every attempt, or B, you are Paragon. You are a Paragon-esque guild, top 0.5%, the best of the best of the best, and thus raid management issues are irrelevant anyway, because you'll be doing everything in your power to get an edge, which means getting loot faster from 25 man, so it's a no-brainer. It's good logic, isn't it? It's really good. Guild management issues. I don't believe that managing a 25-man guild in Cataclysm is going to be uber ridiculous. And even then, Blizzard are conceding and giving you more loot for doing it anyway. Even though I don't believe you deserve it. Honestly. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, ladies and gentlemen. Been on the bleeding edge of content, been away from the bleeding edge of content. Done the 40-mans, done the 25-mans, done the 10-mans. Played WoW since freaking launch. Seen it, done it, lived it. Don't call me biased. I'm just calling out the fact, and so is this guy, that whining and entitlement exists on every possible plane. Instead of the entitled casuals, we've got the so-called entitled hardcores that are so desperate. And the funny thing is this. The guys who are really desperate to maintain the status quo are those that aren't actually the achievers. They're not the real achievers. They're not the guys who are doing really well. Do you see Paragon crying their eyes out about this change? No. Do you see any of the top guilds crying their eyes out about this change? No, you don't. Because they can achieve something real. It doesn't matter. They don't need that false epine of theirs. They don't require it. They don't need it to keep their fragile egos intact. You know what the worst thing is? When the only achievement you have to your name that you can brag about and hold above the heads of everyone else is that I'm in a 25-man guild. None of your opinions matter because you rate 10s. If that's the best thing you've got, is it? Then wow, I can see why you're so upset. Your fragile little bubble of delusions of grandeur and false reality has been shattered by common sense and equality. Boo-hoo! Please allow me to cry you a river. Next one. Encounter difficulty. This is the big one that everyone is hopping out, says the guy in the article. Yes, indeed. The argument is simple. By the very nature of more moving parts and players, a 25-man encounter will always be more difficult than the 10-man version. In spite of Blizzard's best efforts. I've seen so many ridiculous quotes to this topic. I want to read this out because it beggars belief that a community that used to be so well moderated could allow somebody to post something so utterly dumb. It's from Zai. Let's say you had to put your life on the line in a test. Choice 1, 10 people press a button. If they do it correctly, you live, otherwise you die. Choice 2, same task, 25 people. Which would you choose? You might be a reasonable raider, but your analogies are awful. Now, the article goes on to say, obviously the point trying to be made here is that in reality 25 is a larger number than 10, thus making 25 people do the same action properly at the same time is inherently more difficult than making 10 do it. Fantastic point, you've proved that in a glass bubble, made up, useless real-world example, so says this article, a number 2.5 times larger than another number is, well, larger. Genius! Wonder! To most people with a functioning cerebellum, it goes on to say, this illustration would need to be altered to fit a real-world scenario and a real-world example. Something we might see from Blizzard within the smaller group. 2 people must hit the button, and in the larger group, 5 people must hit the button. Thus, in both cases, the group must select 20% of its raid members who are best at button pressing to perform the task. Or a step further, as is often the case, the numbers are identical, not percentages, so in a smaller group, 2 people must hit the button, and likewise, in the larger group, only 2 people, again, must hit the button. Think of examples like tanking, kiting, miscellaneous roles during many boss encounters. In either case, the point is Blizzard will decide which factors of the fight make it challenging and scale those appropriately. Obviously, there was almost never a situation where the entire raid must perform the same action at the same time at present. And certainly, those situations will be even rarer when Blizzard is creating encounters specifically designed to have matching difficulties across both raid sizes. Yeah. Now he goes on to describe heroic Lich King and how exactly you could balance it. Now, I don't want to go into that any further because we're rapidly reaching the end of the segment and indeed the show. I'm going to cap it off here. I'll do some shoutouts and then I shall end it, I think. The point of the fact is this. This crying and this entitlement is coming from an area that you would not expect. And yet it's coming anyway. This is the march of the entitled raiders. You know what? I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be identified as a raider if this is our voice. EJ used to be the voice of the sane, sensible, rational, if elitist, and justifiably so, raiding base. And now it's garbage. Pseudo-intellectual drivel, bad analogies, false dichotomies, fallacies up the wazoo. And quotes like that. Go read the rest of this article, folks. I completely agree with the GM. I'm going to do some shout-outs, then I'm going to cap off the show. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for listening to Blue Police here on cynicalbrit.com. I will see you tomorrow for some more shoutcraft. That shall be good indeed. Check out the rest of the shows. There haven't been all that many this week. I've got to apologise for that. It's been very hectic. I want to remodel a few things. Like, for instance, Gaming Express. It's been taking up way too much of my time. But rather than can it, what I'd like to do is try and take it live once again. I've had it podcast only for so long, but in reality, podcast only takes way longer than live does. So, most likely, I'm going to bring it back live once again. Why not? I'll come in, I'll do the show, I'll do it live, it'll go up on the site, and that'll be that. How does that sound? Let's make that happen. We'll start that on Monday. Okay, ladies and gents, let's do some shoutouts. I shall extend the music bed appropriately for this. Send them in to themoloch@cynicalbrit.com. Alternatively, you can drop me a tweet via Twitter, twitter.com/TotalBiscuit. Send me a message in the IRC channel. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for shoutouts, I am going to provide some shoutouts to those on the chat wall. One Avatar 1, who insists on playing video games while listening to my show and looking away from the camera. It looks like he's playing Halo Reach, but I can't really tell because it's a terrible grainy webcam. What else have we got? Token Black Man in the form of B-Drone. Congratulations for continuing to make us look that little bit more tolerant amongst a sea of pasty white faces. Mini F. Your terrorism is not appreciated in this channel. I would suggest that you leave immediately. Cordain looks like he is on the way to some kind of business encounter. Perhaps he would like to arrange some kind of dealing. Trade some stocks, perhaps. Might I recommend that you buy pounds right now? Because, good lord, it's crashed so hard. If anyone wants to pay me in dollars over the next few days, please, by all means. Hope and Despair, who is substantially less attractive than the person that was on the stream earlier. Nexumus, who's been sitting there looking rather quizzical this entire time, moving his camera around somewhat. He's a little bit chill, isn't he? A little bit relaxed. I like that. That's good. Brian Badondi, who is giggling like a little schoolgirl over there with his Britney Spears-style headset. Minnow Dragon, who is some kind of dirty hacker, and I believe is pointing his webcam at the screen. At the screen! Why? Why would you do that, of all things? Yes, thank you for the low-resolution, terrible hacking. From the looks of it, he's trying to get in. He's got his model swap thing going on. Oh, it's not good at all. Eldrimicrur probably gets the award for the most difficult-to-pronounce name at this point in time. Scrab, welcome to the stream, who I am actually rather surprised and impressed by the chat room have not gone on some kind of lecherous rampage with the presence of a relatively attractive female. Indeed, we have not one but two. Yes, indeed.
Not one, but two Jawmanga worms.
Not Jawmanga worms per se. Yes, females. I tell you, I've got a black guy and I've got two females on my chat room. Anyone who says that this show is for pasty white guys aged 18 to 35 is wrong. And there's the proof. And Vlad the Metal, who perhaps makes up the third female on the oh no, actually, that's a man, isn't it? Oh well, easy mistake to make. Right, shout out time, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get it on. Send it over to the IRC channel or whatever the hell you want. Can I get a shout out for entertaining the IRC with some more interesting pictures from Cataclysm? No, you may not. Screenshots suck, Nymph. I'm sorry. That has to be said. Let's see what else we've got. Email bag is filling up with many, many, many things. Vlad the Druid hates me, doesn't he? I'm cool with that. Shout out to the Hawks, his football team. Stefan Surjesen. What the hell? That's a crazy name. I like it nonetheless. Stefan Surjesen, also known as Fakes, the ex-rogue from Talvanart EU. Shout out to the football team, or should I say American football team, since I'm in Europe. The Hawks, and for winning the first 3 games of the season against all odds. End games, here we come. Can we get a shout out to the third type of raider? That's from Ibix. You are the majority, Ibix. Even though you have a crazy rabbit picture that looks a little bit anime for my liking. I'll not accept that behaviour in this place. Shout out to the Warden for taking my place on cam for the first half of the show. That is from Hope and Despair. Warden. Interesting. It's a very odd term to call it, I must say. Well, there you go. What else have we got? Messages in the tiny chat. Many messages left side and inside. Shout out to the Cynical Fleet from Stukov961. A shout out to Cool Down for being a voice of reason in a world of tards. Yes, indeed. I would like to give that one personally, in fact. That's from Ayomo. A shout out to the Guild Knights of the Round on Olderman US. That's from Sean Casser. Hey, TV, what do you think of the change being made where 10 and 25 are sharing the same weekly cooldown? You just heard it! Lil Rex. Yes, indeed. When is the beta giveaway thing over? What? I have no idea. I suppose I can give you a few beta keys, couldn't I? Who in the chat room needs a StarCraft 2 beta key? Is there anyone on the video wall that needs one? Anyone in the chat room? Let me know. Send me a message if you need a StarCraft 2 beta key. I'll see what I can do. I'll do a little bit of random drawing. I do have a few lying around. A shout out to Angelo from Onin. And also a shout out for getting Battlefield Bad Company 2 from Nymph. Yeah, I suppose you can have it. You bought a good game. Congratulations. That should be its own reward. A shout out to Jeddah and my Guild, whatever you want to call it, Void Zone. That's from, I'm sorry, what is that? That's even worse than the last name. What's that? Okay, fair enough. From Bronze Dragonfly EU. That's what you get for having a stupid name. Dear Lord. Ladies and gentlemen, my name has been Total Biscuit. And you have been listening to Blue Please. And one last shout out to some kind of mini-human being. It's small, and perhaps a little bit disproportionate. It appears to be wearing red. And funnily enough, it is standing on Hope and Despair. Is it some kind of parasite? Some kind of infestation? Some kind of snow kobold? Who knows? I'm out of here, folks. Thank you for listening. As always, you have been a fantastic audience. So, I suppose we should end the show on something fun, shall we? I haven't played this one in a while. I think you guys have been missing it. What do you reckon? Good night.